And it just goes on. Time to make the club go up. Time to shut the club down. This is not how I woke up, but it's how I look now. If you leave with me, we'll be on till morn. Then we rinse and repeat. And it just goes on. And it just goes on. And it just goes on. And it just goes on.
Hello and welcome. We're the Aussie Guys. I'm AJ. Here with me is G. How are you, G?
Good, mate. Good.
Early morning?
It
Actually, it's not too early. We've had much earlier mornings.
I had to get up early because I got the AM, PM.
Oh.
So had to get up early and at 5 o'clock this morning and do some
research?
Some research, yes.
Yeah, it's a bit quick fire.
But look, down some breakfast.
This will probably be a fairly easy one, actually, I imagine. And our guest, we had him on last year. Actually, we had him on for a couple of years. I forget. But he certainly is a regular, and it's fantastic to get him on. Les Bowen, who covers the Eagles for the Philadelphia Daily News and the Philadelphia Inquirer. His stuff is fantastic. Certainly give him a follow on Twitter at Les Bowen. And it's always great to chat to him. And, you know, I don't know, G, maybe he'll have... Do you think he'll have anything to say? I don't know if the Eagles did anything. Did they?
It's all pretty quiet down there, isn't it?
It's a small town, there. Philly.
It is.
You know.
They're not very passionate about the football team.
No, they probably didn't notice. Do you think they noticed?
No, I don't think they did. They probably paid more attention to our Australian basketball player. I can't even think of his name. I don't follow the basketball.
Our Australian basketball player?
Yeah, plays for the... is it the 76ers? The
Does he?
Team? Yes.
Oh, now you shouldn't have mentioned that because I got no idea who it is. I should.
He won the Rookie of the Year.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
His name slips me, but like I said, I'm not a basketball...
Me neither.
No,
oh, man. Well, anyway, listen, we'll get him on the line and, we'll have some fun chatting Eagles. All right, we've got Les on the phone, and Les, it's great to have you back again. Wonderful to chat.
Well, it's good to be here, and, what a miraculous year the Eagles are coming off of, and, I'm happy to talk about it.
What happened, Les? I've got no idea. No, I'm just... And I was thinking about, because there are a few things that are kind of notable. Well, there's a lot. There is honestly a lot. But there were some things that I thought might be sort of good to touch on because I went back and had a look. In preparation for this, I had a look just to refresh my memory. I didn't need much of a refresh, but I had a look at Carson Wentz's highlights of 2017, and my goodness, just... Apart from the fact that I'm just pining for football to actually begin, it was when you rely on everything that he did in 2017 up, it's so impressive. And I can only imagine that when he did tear his ACL in week 14, the feeling in Philadelphia must have been just, you could have cut the air with a knife, I imagine.
Yeah, it was really something. That's really the most incredible thing about the Eagles winning the Super Bowl is that that game in Los Angeles that you're referring to, I was out there, and when they were beating the Rams, that was the first time that I really thought, boy, this team is something special. They can win the Super Bowl. And then, of course, Carson got hurt, and it was apparent right away that this was a very serious injury, and he wasn't going to play again in that season. And I would have, at that point, it was like, okay, this has been a great year, but it's not meant to be. They might win a playoff game or something, but, they're not going to win the whole thing. That's absurd. Nobody does that. And, the immediate aftermath was, boy, so much for that. I don't think people were as upset as they might have been in that the Eagles weren't really expected to be a great team last season in the first place. They were year 2 of a rebuilding project. Everybody would have been happy when the season began if they had just made the playoffs. So when he went down, I think people were disappointed, but they really weren't seeing this as a championship season anyway. So, it was kind of like, oh, well, let's see what happens here. Nice run while it lasted, so on and so forth. And but then after things got going again with Foles, people very quickly got excited again.
I know, and they only write them like that in fairy tales, don't they? Nick Foles, the guy who was, I won't say drummed out of town. I mean, really, he had that sort of kind of miraculous season with Chip Kelly, and then he left with his tail between his legs after a very, polar opposite season, and then bounced around a little bit, never sort of caught on anywhere. And then, he's sitting in Philadelphia as the backup, and I would say probably much maligned, really, by fans.
Yeah, I don't think anybody here, I think fans were glad to see him come back just because he was a nice guy and they had good memories of that 2013 season. But I don't think anybody expected anything of him right off the bat. I don't think anyone thought this guy can play. I mean, Carson Wentz would have been the MVP of the league if he had stayed healthy. And no one expected Foles to play at that level. And he kind of didn't play at that level until the final 2 games of the season in the playoffs.
Yep.
But then he did. He played at, an extraordinary level, at a Tom Brady level, which is kind of what they needed to win the whole thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, Joe Flacco built his whole career on postseason.
A playoff run.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And there's lots of other, I mean, obviously Nick Foles is an amazing story, but there's lots of other stories. So, as you mentioned, Carson Wentz was in serious MVP consideration. Jay Ajayi, who, also probably goes down as one of the luckiest men in the league, bounced from a 6-10 team to, getting a ring. Nelson Aguilar, whose career was resurrected, I really think that he looked like almost, potentially a bust.
Oh, yeah.
Torrey Smith kind of swung
when a
in there.
guy has 2 bad years, like Aguilar had, one year you can say, okay, he's a rookie, it's a big transition from college, but that second year was worse, and it was evident that, he was dropping passes, he was making mistakes, he was lining up wrong. That was a famous thing that happened in a game in 2016 when he negated a touchdown to Zach Ertz in an important game because he wasn't lined up right. When people do things like that, you think, well, this guy just mentally and emotionally doesn't have what it takes. But somehow he got himself together last offseason and came back as a different guy. And that was a huge part of them winning it all, really, was his development into a really good, reliable, difference-making type receiver.
Let's dive into, now I know my, because we've split it up, G's going to talk to you about the offense, and I know I'm taking some of his questions from him, so I'm going to, so we might dive into free agency and the draft. So, it's fairly typical that the free agency period after winning the Super Bowl is one in which you lose a lot of players. And that was true. Howie Roseman, I think, now I don't know if this number is completely accurate to the second, but I think lost 12 players to free agency. It could be a different number. But
I don't know exactly. I know they didn't lose many starters. It was mostly depth players that they lost to free agency. And some of them they just let go. They didn't try to keep everybody. So, yeah, I don't think they suffered any horrendous losses in free agency. Trey Burton, the guy who threw the touchdown pass in the Philly special, was a prominent guy. They lost Patrick Robinson, who did a wonderful job as the nickel corner, kind of out of nowhere, frankly. They lost him, and he scored an amazing touchdown in that NFC Championship game. But, nobody that was really a key cog in the team left, which is kind of remarkable when you win a Super Bowl, that you're able to keep all of the important, or most important pieces together.
Yeah, I would argue Vinnie Curry perhaps, but I mean you traded for Michael Bennett, so that's sort of a exchange there.
Yeah, and with Derek Barnett's development, I'm not sure there was going to be a lot of playing time for Vinny this year. Vinny had a weird career as an Eagle. He was a good player, but he got a whole bunch of sacks one year when he wasn't playing very much, and off of that, they gave him a huge contract that, is the kind of contract you give to somebody who's going to get a whole bunch of sacks going forward, and he didn't. And, I think that was I think most people weren't surprised that he ended up somewhere else. He's a good player. He'll do well in Tampa, but like I said, odd career here, really. I think he raised expectations perhaps a little beyond what he could really deliver on.
Others that you lost, you traded, so Torrey Smith left the building, so he quickly came in and out in a trade for Darryl Worley from the Panthers. You signed Haloti Ngata.
That didn't work out, yeah.
No, that's right.
Yeah, Worley managed to get himself arrested right away, and the Eagles were very quick to rid themselves of that situation. But they've signed a lot of pretty good players. Some of them are older, and some of them are a little banged up, and that's a bit of a concern. You don't have too many guys like that. But Ngata, we haven't really seen him on the field yet. Michael Bennett is healthy, but he's got his own situations. He has a legal situation that's playing out. So and they added some good players through the draft too. I think we weren't too sure what they were going to do going into the draft. We knew they needed somebody to replace Trey Burton, and they did that right away with Dallas Goedert. And then they added to the pass rushing a lot with a couple guys, which we really didn't foresee. We kind of thought they needed a safety real bad, but that's still something that's a little bit up in the air heading into training camp, is who the third safety is. But again, that's not a crushing problem. But yeah, I thought they had a pretty good year in free agency. Is there anybody I'm leaving out that you especially wanted to mention?
Oh, no, not really. I was going to just mention Mike Wallace, who's got to be an upgrade over Torrey Smith, surely.
Well, he's had a weird career, Mike Wallace has, but yeah, I think he's a speedy, veteran guy that ought to have a role. We don't really know what that role is going to be, but it's not clear. Mac Hollins from last season, who was a rookie, might be the guy who's more the Torrey Smith guy. It just depends on how training camp goes, I think they wanted to leave room, like I said about Derek Barnett, they wanted to leave room for some of these young guys to take a bigger piece of the pie, so they didn't sign like superstars who are going to demand a certain percentage of the plays or the ball, So, it'll be interesting to see where Mike Wallace is. It's been, a few years ago he was very, very highly thought of. He's kind of bounced around a little bit since then. But that is an interesting name. You're right.
Yeah, you are right in that he has bounced around, and so obviously the draft board was a little reduced. There wasn't a whole lot of picks that Howie Roseman had to play with. It's worth mentioning
fewest picks in 40 years, really.
Oh, really? Wow.
Fewest picks they've had, yeah. So but they knew that going in. I mean, it was something they planned for. They made these deals to pick up people like Ajayi and Ronald Darby, and giving away picks. And of course, they were still feeling this was the last year where they were feeling effects from the Wentz trade.
Yes.
And but yeah, they did have they only made 5 picks, and that is the fewest in 40 years. But they've been very good at identifying guys, and this is a bigger and bigger deal in the NFL, I think, now, is identifying guys you can sign after the draft who, are pretty good players, can contribute, got overlooked for some reason, didn't have a great combine, the college coach didn't talk them up. Corey Clement is a tremendous example of that. Undrafted last season, played a huge role in winning the Super Bowl. So I do think that I think they found some guys, they'll help them, but certainly the draft class is a small one.
Yeah, and it's worth just mentioning on the end, because we are Australian, you did draft an Aussie rugby player.
Yes.
Yeah, Jordan Mailata, I think I'm pronouncing his surname correctly.
Yes.
So anyway, it'll be interesting to see how that pans out, but...
yeah, that is a fascinating... Everybody here is really interested in that experiment. I can't imagine he's going to help them this season. He's just never played American football, but he's humongous. I mean, he's like 6'8", 330, and he moves well. He's not just a big guy. He's very athletic, light on his feet, and you can certainly see, potential there. They have him at left tackle, which is a little bit of a tough position to learn, I think. There's a lot about balance and using your hands and what to expect from the pass rushers and all that stuff that is really foreign to him right now. And I think he's probably going to need a full year maybe on the practice squad to sort of figure out where he is and what's going on. But boy, nobody has better tools than that guy, and that's going to be a big story, I think, going forward. And then there's another, Cam Johnston, the punter, also is from Australia.
Oh, nice. I didn't even realize, but
indeed.
Fantastic. Well, listen, let's talk offense. Gee, I know you're itching to dive into...
Is there anything left? You asked a fair bit of Les. So let's see what we can do. But we'll start with the quarterback. So we spoke about Wentz going down, and so it ended up being worse, didn't it? It wasn't just the ACL, Les. It was also the LCL that he did. Mm-hmm. And look, there has been a lot of talk about when he's going to be ready. So, Foles takes over, and we saw what Foles... Well, it's obvious to everybody what happened and how he played. Is it as easy? And look, it has to be because Wentz is a guy, but how's the situation handled, just handing back the keys to the car? And the keys to the car aren't your normal set of keys anymore. They're diamond encrusted, aren't they now? So,
I'm not aware of any situation like this in the NFL since I've been watching it. And I'm writing about this for our training camp preview. I think it's fascinating, and it's really a key to how the team does going forward. I think the Eagles are incredibly lucky. I don't think this is really anything they designed. It's just who these guys are. When Wentz went down last season, he was very generous to Foles. He didn't... Some guys in that position would have maybe not resented Foles' success, but worried a little bit about, okay, if this guy wins the Super Bowl, who am I? What's going on here? Wentz was not like that. He graciously shared the stage and stepped to the rear, for Foles' big moment. And then when the off season began, when they began spring work again, obviously Wentz isn't really ready to lead the team, in every practice drill, but he was definitely the key voice again, because they know that they assume that he's going to be healthy, pretty soon. So he kind of stepped forward again, and Foles handled that tremendously well. Foles could have, after that Super Bowl, said, okay, trade me somewhere. I want to start. He didn't do that. In fact, he did the opposite of that. He kind of made it plain that if they traded him, which they were interested in doing, having so few draft picks, if they traded him, he didn't want to go just anywhere, that he would want to go to a team where he could be successful, which is the opposite of what happened last time. They traded him to a bad St. Louis Rams team under a coach, Jeff Fisher, who's not an offensive guy, and his career kind of went up in smoke. So Foles handled the transition back to Wentz, at least emotionally back to Wentz, very, very well. And I just think it's still going to be very odd when training camp starts. Wentz has been doing more and more as the spring progressed. And when training camp starts, he's going to be doing a lot in practice. Even if he isn't able to play in preseason games, it sure looks like he's almost 100% ready to go in practice where he doesn't get hit. So they're going to have to find ways to split these reps. They only have a certain amount of time with these guys. There are very stringent rules about how much you can be on the field, how many reps you can take as a team. They're going to have to find ways of getting both these guys ready, and they're going to have to sort of parse up the leadership and the way they relate to each other. But they seem to be doing that very, very well. It just seems seamless to them. They understand each other. They're very close friends. It just doesn't seem that there's any... and people have tried to gin it up a little bit. There have been some questions. National media comes in and asks, Nick Foles, don't you think you ought to have a chance to earn the starting job, and stuff like that. And there just hasn't been, nobody's batted an eye. Nobody is, there's just not any hint of discord or animosity or jealousy, or I don't even know if this is the best thing for him in the long run, but what he wants to do is to be here this season, maybe play a game or two early if Wentz isn't quite ready, and then sit down and help Wentz however he can and be a free agent next spring. We're not quite there yet, though. I mean, it's still possible that somebody, just like 2 years ago when Sam Bradford was going to be the Eagles' starting quarterback and Minnesota lost their quarterback right before the season started and then offered the Eagles a lot for Sam Bradford, somebody could do that. And there's even talk that, Tampa Bay just lost Jameis Winston for 4 games to a suspension, and people there aren't very happy with Jameis Winston, and this is not the first off-field adventure he has had in his life. And, there's talk that somebody, Tampa or somebody, could step up and make the Eagles a really big offer for Nick. And that, I say it's probably 50-50, something like that happens. But for the time being, they're both handling this, 2 quarterbacks in the kitchen thing very, very well, and it's that's really the key, I think, to the season, frankly, is how that goes.
Yeah, I was going to say, because what happens if, like you said, that Foles plays the first couple of games and he picks up and the whole offense just starts moving along from its Super Bowl win, just like nothing, like it's just continuing on.
Yeah.
And then you got Carson Wentz sitting there, and the team starts going, well, but we're doing so well with Nick Foles. What?
Yeah, I don't know.
Momentum?
I mean, realistically, Carson Wentz is the guy that you drafted, that you traded up to draft, that you gave all these picks for, that you have invested your future in, that is a great young quarterback. Nick rose to the occasion. Like I said, he had 2 amazing games at the end of the season when it mattered the most. I don't think most people in the NFL think that he's comparable to Carson Wentz in terms of his overall talent, his athleticism, and so on. But yeah, you could have a situation where the opposite happens, where Wentz starts the season and maybe isn't feeling, he's not going to be able to jump around and dodge rushers right away, the way that he did before he got hurt. Mm-hmm. It's going to take probably most of the year to get that stuff back, and maybe he isn't as successful. What if Wentz starts the season and they're 0-3 or something, and he isn't playing well? There are all kinds of scenarios you can concoct, and the way that you avoid that is probably by trading Foles, which is why I think there's a decent chance that it could still happen. Because we were talking about the same stuff 2 years ago with the Bradford-Wentz thing. Like they said Bradford's the starter. They say Wentz is going to sit and watch him and learn. Well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And, voila, a week before the season starts, Sam Bradford's a Viking, and nobody has to worry about it anymore. So, I won't be shocked if that happens again, frankly.
Yeah, because you got to think from, like, we've all played a sport probably at some level, and you do an injury, like Wentz has done, and being a bad knee one at that, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in the fray, and your guys are coming at your legs, things you didn't worry about before because you never had an injury in that spot. All of a sudden now I've got a knee. It does, no matter what anybody says, the psychological part of getting over an injury is by far the hardest, and that could start.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And in this case, though, the fact that he was injured so late in the season, the middle of December, I mean, physically, even though he's having an incredible recovery, the other muscles in his leg, it's just not going to all be back in September. It takes a full year to really get back everything that you had before you sat down and put your leg in a cast, Yeah. And one of the challenges for him is going to be, because he can't move and hold the ball and, stiff-arm guys and spin around and stuff like that, he could get hurt because he can't move as well.
Yes.
Because he's used to being able to get it out of people's way so much. He's going to have to really be on top of that, they're going to be on top of that, and kind of, I think he's going to have to play a little bit, at least in the early going, a little bit more like Foles, be more of a pocket passer, not, get rid of the ball, don't buy time, don't wait for something to develop, just make your throw and see what happens. I think that's the most prudent way to move forward for them, so that you're not standing back there and risking something really terrible happening. But, it's one of those things that's just going to be, like I said, the focus of the season, I think, is what happens at the quarterback position, when's his recovery, how Foles, what role Foles ends up playing, how he does. Nothing ever like it that I've ever seen.
That's so true about the way that Wentz plays. He is a physical quarterback. He will run. He will take the ball. He will take tacklers on. So he's got trying to get rid of that part out of his game for now, worrying about the knee probably in the back of his mind, thinking about who's the open guy. All these things are racing through his head in the split seconds you have to throw the ball or make a decision what you're going to do. It's going to be really interesting to see how he handles the whole situation.
Because I don't think he's ever been in that position. He's had injuries before, but they've been like wrist injuries and things like that. I don't think he's ever been back there and not been able to depend on his physicality, and it's going to be quite an adjustment, and it's nothing you can really do in spring work or training camp or anything like that because nobody can touch you, so it's not like something he can really work on. It's going to be something he does, by himself, just kind of mentally.
Yes. Yeah. So we spent a bit of time on the QBs, but really it's the most intriguing part of the offense, really,
absolutely.
This coming season. So we'll move on the running backs. Obviously, we spoke about Jay Ajayi. He leaves the sun and the beaches of Florida and heads to the beaches and the sun of Philadelphia.
Well, South Jersey anyway,
yeah. He comes in and, mate, he does a great job. He runs for 5.8 yards a carry behind an offensive line that we'll discuss, which was fantastic. LeGarrette Blount leaves, takes another Super Bowl ring and moves on to Detroit. And the guy ended up with 100 more carries than anybody who was below him on the chart. As we spoke about, Corey Clement, he shows it and played as though he deserves more time in the offense going to 2018. Darren Sproles they signed him up for 1 year, 100 was a mil guaranteed, and he can make more in incentives. So obviously they're not going to just give him money, and he's going to disappear this year. And then you've still got Pumphrey and Smallwood, and you bring in Josh Adams as a undrafted free agent out of Notre Dame. So what's the makeup of the backfield going into the 18-19 season?
Well, I think Ajayi is the lead guy with a full off-season behind him and a better grounding in the offense. I think they expect him to step forward and be the main guy. But like I was saying earlier, they left room for their young guys. They didn't bring in – a lot of people thought they would try to get a running back, draft a running back high or sign a running back in free agency to replace Blount. But they're really expecting Corey Clement to step forward as he did late in the season in the playoffs. They want to leave room for that. He's not going to be stuck to the bench. And even Darren Sproles, having Sproles back doesn't really, it's good insurance if Clement doesn't play well or if he gets hurt or something, but I think Sproles is back mainly to be a returner and to be kind of a leadership guy in the running back room. I don't really think they expect a ton from him at age 35 and coming off a very serious injury in his case. So I think you're looking at Ajayi and you're looking at Clement as the two main guys, and we'll see. Donnell Pumphrey, that was one of the few sour notes of 2017, and Clement really bailed him out there. They drafted Donnell Pumphrey, and he just didn't look like he could do anything. He's very small and slight, and he wasn't all that fast in the preseason, and he developed a hamstring problem, and they quickly put him on injured reserve so they could stash him for the year and not have to play him. So he is a little bigger, not any taller, obviously, but he's added some weight, and he claims that the adjustment to the Eagles' offense, that he was hesitant, that he is quicker than he showed last year, and that he understands the offense now, and he'll be the guy that he was in college, and we'll see if he is. There'll be room for him too, But right now I think it's Ajayi and it's Clement are the two guys you want to look at as the focal point of the running game.
All right, so we move across the receiving core. I usually have a bunch more together, but with the tight end situation, I want to talk about that individually. So we'll just talk about the wide receivers for now. Like Torrey Smith is gone, which nothing against Torrey Smith, but it's a no great loss. I think the addition of, as we spoke about with Mike Wallace, is definitely an upgrade over Smith.
Yeah.
You had no 1,000-yard guy, but you had a few guys that you just spread it amongst them, didn't you? Like Jeffrey, 789 with 9 TDs. Aguilar, which we spoke about, his coming out year, 768 and 8 TDs. And it was more of the play that we saw at USC, people expected. So, look, Jeffrey has the surgery. Could you just talk about after he signs and he goes, I've got to go and have the shoulder surgery. Did they have any inclination that he was playing with a hurt shoulder? Because obviously he did.
Yeah, they did know that. It happened way early in training camp, apparently, and it's hard to know. I mean, people say, oh, my heavens, he had to have his rotator cuff repaired. He must have been in terrible pain. But my understanding is he really wasn't, that it needed to be fixed, but it wasn't something that really limited him a whole lot during the season. He did take some practice time off here and there, and, but he had a great year, and I think they expect him to be even better this year than he was last. He has the big contract now that he wanted, and I think he and Aguilar are going to be the two main receiving targets, and I think Mac Hollins is the third guy, and we'll see if Wallace can kind of wrest that from Hollins, or if Wallace is going to be more of a fourth guy. I think they would have had, I know you just wanted to talk about the wideouts, but if Zach Ertz hadn't missed 2 games, I think he would have been a 1,000-yard receiver. He ended up at 8-something, I believe. So he was really, Ertz is the number one receiver on the team, I think. So you do have to kind of factor that in a little bit. But yeah, I think the wideouts will be fine. They're not a star-studded group, but you don't. Who was the last really dominant wideout who won a Super Bowl? That's just not how you. That's not been a part of the winning formula in the NFL lately. There are a lot of really spectacular, fun to watch guys like Odell Beckham and Des Bryant, but you don't see them playing in February.
I'd like to say 2 years ago, my Falcons with Julio Jones, but I can't.
Julio Jones was, he was close. They didn't. Yeah. They should have won.
They should have.
They didn't win.
No, please don't remind me, Led. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And no fault of his own, because the catch that he caught in the last couple of minutes on that side was probably, I think, they all speak about the who was it, the tight end in
the catch.
The catch of who was
right.
It?
But he won it was Dwight Clark, wasn't it?
Oh, Dwight Clark, who recently passed away.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking that Rodgers threw it to the tight end. Who was the tight end in that year in Green Bay that caught that ball on the side? To me, Julio Jones catching that ball with a couple of minutes to go, with the situation that it was, and the catch that he caught was probably the most. It was the best catch of the season. But I'm going over.
Digress. Yeah.
I don't want to go over. But we'll
with Julio though, it's interesting. Yeah. My point was, a dominant receiver isn't like a dominant quarterback or something like that. You can kind of control a dominant receiver a little bit in the playoffs. And if you saw the Eagles' first playoff game against the Falcons, the last play was to Julio.
Yeah.
And, he's a great receiver, but he didn't catch it. And the Eagles won the game.
Yeah.
So my point is, dominant receiver isn't really the be-all and end-all. There are other positions that you want to be dominant at more than you want to be dominant at wide receiver, I think, in my opinion.
Oh, no, and the Eagles showed that, didn't they, in the Super Bowl as well?
Yeah.
Just spread the love around, and you get a ring. Now, we will talk about the tight end. So Burton's gone to the Bears. Now, he was just one of those guys that always made hay while the sun shone, didn't he? Like, he was just... When you needed something, he was always so reliable. Ertz, established himself again as one of the top tight ends in the league. He had the second most targets on the team, led the team in yards, was equal second with 8 TDs, one behind Jeffrey and equal with Aguilar. Now, then you go out and you draft Dallas Goedert. Now, this guy has a little bit of freaky about him. How do you see the Ertz is happy with the guy coming in? How do you see the combination of the two working? Because Burton was was he happy, but he played that second role very well.
Yeah, he really did. He was a leader on special teams, but this is kind of a object case of what happens when you win a Super Bowl. The Bears gave him $32 million over 4 years, and you just can't, for a guy who's not a starter, you can't keep your salary cap in check if you're the Eagles and match something like that. There's just no way. So that's what happens. You lose guys like that. I think they're in pretty good shape. They also, Brent Selleck they let go of, who was a tremendous leader and a stalwart for many years, 11 years. So with Burton and Selleck both gone, I think that opens up quite a bit of room for Dallas Goedert without taking anything away from Ertz. The thing about Goddard is he's really a receiver, and you see this more and more with guys coming out of college. He doesn't know the first thing about blocking.
No.
So they're going to have to really work with him, and we'll just see. They also signed Richard Rodgers, a veteran from the Packers who's not nearly the athlete that Goddard is, but we'll just see how much they trust Goddard and how much they want him on the field. If he misses a couple blocks and the quarterback gets blasted, that's the things that get rookies set down.
Yeah.
So, but Goddard is an amazing athlete. And in spring drills where there's no hitting and the blocking isn't really a factor, you noticed him. You noticed him as a receiver. He's huge. He's very confident and has great hands. And I'm interested to see what he does. I think he could definitely make an impact.
We talk often about the size of guys' hands and how a ball disappears. It seriously disappears in this guy's hands. He's got some of the biggest hands I've ever seen. Well, it looks that way anyway.
Point. Yeah.
So, and he does have.
He was making a lot of one-handed catches in the spring, and it was you could really see some potential there. Put him and Ertz both in on a goal line, and hard time covering both of them, I think.
Well, without a doubt. So. The guys that protect and start the whole thing is probably the O-line. So everybody who started the Super Bowl is back this season. If you just want to give us a quick summary of what they achieved last year with, you lose Jason Peters, Samalu, Falters, and is it Sten Wozniacki? Is that how you pronounce his last name? Wisniewski comes in and takes over and just exceeds everybody's what was expected from him. So a little rundown from how they played last year and the great job that they did and what's going to happen 2018, 2019 going forward.
Yeah, the picture looks so different now than it did a year ago. A year ago, Jason Kelsey, the center, was coming off a bad year. People were wondering if he needed to be replaced. They had this second-year guy, Suamalo, who they were projecting as a starter at left guard, even though he hadn't played much as a rookie. And they had Jason Peters, who was the most dominant left tackle in football. Of course, he went down early in October, and they had to bring in Halapoulivaati Vaitai, who had played some on the other side for Lane Johnson the previous year, but really didn't distinguish himself a whole lot. He was now moving to the left side. And, it was kind of a thrown-together group that nobody expected great things from. But they really grew together nicely during the season, and they were extraordinary in the playoffs. And I think that was kind of an underappreciated part of why the Eagles won the Super Bowl was, as we said before, we were talking about the quarterbacks, Nick Foles doesn't move like Carson Wentz. He doesn't have that kind of escapability. Well, in the playoffs, he didn't need to. Especially Vaitai really stepped up and handled some really great pass rushers exceedingly well. And by the end of the season, the Eagles' offensive line was being very well recognized. Brandon Brooks made the Pro Bowl. Kelsey, it was really an outstanding group. You mentioned Wisniewski. He had a tremendous year. Lane Johnson's probably the best right tackle in the NFL now, I would say. So now you got Peters coming back, and you don't know that he's going to be what he was before, but he has come back from serious injury before, and I wouldn't bet against him. So you're adding him, and you've got Vaitai still there as somebody you can bring in off the bench, and I think that's a very, very strong unit for the Eagles. I don't think there's any question that that's the best offensive line in the division, including Dallas, which has a good offensive line. I just think they've earned that from what they did last year.
Well, it's a nice transition, actually, Les, to another strength of the team, which is the D-line. Let's switch lines. And the defensive line really, there's going to be quite a bit of rotation, but when you look at the names, and I guess maybe with the loss of Vinnie Curry, Derek Barnett probably steps into the starter role, but you've got Barnett, Timmy Jernigan, Fletcher Cox, and Brandon Graham. But in the rotation, obviously, Michael Bennett, you've got Chris Long, you've got Haloti Ngata as others. It's deep. That is a deep and scary D-line.
Yeah, and it's going to be real interesting how it all sorts out, how much you see Bennett playing inside, things like that. There's some, like we said before, Ngata hasn't really been totally healthy yet, and Tim Jernigan had some surgery in the off season, and it's not clear that he's going to be ready for week one. So, suddenly the tackle situation probably demands a little more. They lost Bo Allen in free agency. They're going to need some people to step up there, but I think they have people who can do that. I think, you can pretty much play anybody opposite Fletcher Cox, and they'll look pretty good because the other team's focusing on Fletcher Cox. But adding Bennett, I think, assuming all of his various situations off the field are resolved, I think adding Bennett is really a big move. And Derek Barnett, really came on toward the end of last season. I'm pretty sure they're expecting him to start this year. So, and of course, Brandon Graham has kind of been the linchpin there. And a little bit of drama with Brandon. This is the last year of his contract, and he would very much like to sign a long deal for a lot of money. The Eagles are looking at the fact that they are deep at the defensive line and the fact that pretty soon they're going to pay Carson Wentz a whole lot of money. And I don't think they're as eager as Brandon is to get this done. And, he's a real leader and a real important voice, a guy that played through a terrible high ankle sprain in the playoffs and made probably the pivotal play of the Super Bowl. You'd like to see that get straightened out. You don't want to see him leaving here feeling slighted or, that he didn't get what he deserved. So they've kind of got to finesse that somehow. I think a shorter-term deal for a lot of money might be the way to go. I don't really know how they're going to do that, but it is one thing that's kind of hanging out there.
Yeah, absolutely. In ways, in a defense, you can have one strong unit and that can disguise the weaknesses of other units on the field, and maybe that's true of the Eagles because in the middle is, if you've got a hard exterior, the middle is a soft, gooey center because, Kendricks was released, which I don't personally wasn't a fan of. Warrillow's just a guy, but he was a guy you probably needed given the unit, and he's gone with an ACL. You've got Jordan Hicks and Nigel Bradham, who was re-signed as the best options. There's not a whole lot of depth behind them, though.
Yeah, I think they're looking at some young guys. They brought in a free agent, Quentin Nelson, who's was playing some pretty decent snaps for the Broncos. He wasn't a starter on a really good linebacking core there. They think he can step up. They also have Nate Gary, who didn't play hardly at all as a rookie last year. He was transitioning from having played safety in college to linebacker in the NFL, and that's a tough transition. But I think they believe that he has made tremendous progress, and he'll be a big part of what they do this year. I wouldn't be shocked, though, to see them still make a move at that position before the season starts, depending on how everybody looks. You know, the thing with Jordan Hicks is he's a wonderful player, but he's been hurt a lot. And, you know, it's just not clear. That was always the thing with Kendricks was, you know, can you really get rid of Kendricks? You don't know what's going to happen with Hicks. And certainly last season, Kendricks helped them out quite a bit when Hicks went down. So that's something to watch. It really is. I do think they're okay for the moment. But yeah, it's an area where they're not deep, I don't think, at linebacker.
No, and it probably also helps that the defensive backfield is also quite strong. Maybe not as strong as the D-line, but really good. I mean, you've Sidney Jones, Ronald Darby, Jalen Mills, Douglas, obviously Rodney McLeod and Malcolm Jenkins in the middle. There's a lot of good depth in the defensive backfield. Yeah,
some things have to be sorted out, but you're right. There are a lot of players there, especially at corner. They're really deep at corner, but I mentioned Patrick Robinson, who did such a tremendous job in the nickel, and they play mostly nickel, so that's a huge spot. Somebody has to be identified who's going to take that spot. It could be Sidney Jones, who sat out last year pretty much with Achilles. You know, it could be somebody like Rasul Douglas, or it could be Jalen Mills. But it looks right now like Darby and Mills are the outside starters, and maybe Jones takes the slot role. But, you know, that'll all be determined in the preseason, who outplays whom, and we'll see. The safeties are definitely going to be McLeod and Jenkins. They don't have that third safety right now, though. It was Corey Graham last season, and again, he was a guy that played a key role. He's still sitting there if they want to re-sign him. I think that could happen, but they need somebody to step up and be the third safety, and it would be really nice, and I think maybe the reason they haven't re-signed Corey Graham is it'd be really nice if that was some kind of young guy you found somewhere, because Jenkins and McLeod aren't going to play forever, and you kind of need somebody in the pipeline there to succeed them. But, you know, if you have to go with Corey Graham, you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Les, I'm conscious of your time, and this has been fantastic. We've covered off so much. Just to round us out, we've been asking our guests, and I don't know if you recall, but last year I think we were asking people to nominate a step-up player, and I can't remember who you said, okay. But I feel like you probably hit the nail on the head with someone like Carson Wentz or Nelson Aguilar or someone. But this year we're asking our guests to nominate who do you think is the locker room guy for the Eagles? And it could be more than one, but who do you think is that guy that's sort of, you know, a bit of a rah-rah or motivational guy in the locker room?
Well, I think Malcolm Jenkins is the leader of the defense. I don't know if he is kind of a rah-rah guy, but it's more of a moral leadership kind of thing. He's the statesman, the guy that, you know, kind of sets the tone for them. I think guys know that they're not playing on a team where guys do silly things off the field, which is what happened with Darryl Worley. You know, Malcolm Jenkins sets a very sort of somber leadership tone defensively. Offensively, it's really Wentz. He is the leader. Maybe with Zach Ertz as a second. Wentz is the guy that talks to everybody, that notices everything, that, you know, really thinks a lot about leadership and how to present things and who to kind of. I don't think he yells at guys, but I think he might be, you know, very, very diplomatic in some situations and a little harsher in others if he knows a guy can really take it. And I think it's his offense, very definitely.
Wonderful. Les, it's been an absolute pleasure as always, and I'm so appreciative of your time, and it's been wonderful chatting.
It has been great talking to you guys. If I ever get to Australia, I'm going to say hello.
Oh, that would be wonderful. And
mate, always a free room for you.
Always. And
all right.
It's I always enjoy your Twitter. I did sort of give it a plug at the beginning, but at Les Bowen.
Thank you.
And certainly the the things that you write for the Philadelphia Daily News are fantastic, and your Twitter isn't just sport as well. You've got all sorts of things on there, but you're a good follow, and your material is fantastic. It's a great read. So thank you so much, Les.
Well, thank you for saying so, AJ. And both of you guys, thank you for the time, and hope you have a great year.
No, thank you, and I'm sure it's going to be, at the very, very least, certainly a great, it'll be a good watch in Philadelphia.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of stories.
It's got to be fascinating, whatever happens, yeah.
That's right. Okay, Les, thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and, best of luck for the year.
All righty. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Les. See you. Bye. Well, gee, that was fantastic, and Les, man, he's great to talk to.
How much time did he give you?
Oh.
You just, mate, you could say one small line of just a question, and
he goes.
just give,
Yep.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. So I hope you enjoyed that, Eagles fans and everybody else. There's fantastic information in there. That was in depth as all get out. So brilliant.
Absolutely.
All right, well, we're going to keep on moving, and we'll wrap this one up. And as always, thanks for listening. On behalf of G and myself, catch you next time.